Chapter 8. He was in Brisbane, he said, and walking down Queen Street, and it was a fine day, a beautiful day, and many people about. And it was in his mind to sit a while in the park and read the latest copy of the Dublin Review, when he saw a nun coming along the street, and this nun was on her own. Strange, I think, nuns go about in pairs. You'll never see one by herself in public unless her companion has been spirited away from her side, and that's unlikely. And people were looking hard at this nun, and no wonder, for she was holding her skirts up, showing broad black shoes, and several inches of hose blacker than the ink from an octopus. And she was mincing a bit in her walk, and her face, a tight oval inside the wimple, was smiling and fluttering its eyes with a faraway look. Lord, what is this? I think. Some poor sister gone out of her head and escaped from the convent and not knowing what she's doing. Then suddenly she became like any nun, gentle and decorous, dropping her skirts and sobering her face, and there was nothing strange about her in the least, except that in passing a pub she stopped and looked inquisitively through the pub door, and suddenly throwing her shoulders back, she smiled and walked in. Holy Father, what sacrilege is this? And swiftly I went over the street and into the pub, and you know the babble in a pub when it's full. There was no babble, there were stares and a silence like the tomb, and away had been cleared for the nun, and there she was at the bar, taking no notice of anybody, and surrounded by men with question marks all over their faces. The nun said in a clear, sweet voice like any woman, a "Midi, please," and she raked in the pockets of her vestments and brought out a florin and planked it on the counter, and the stunned barmaid put the middy down in front of her, and the nun pulled her skirts back a bit as she put her foot on the brass rail. Then, Lord bless us, she picked up the glass of beer and downed it like that in a catwink. And I stepped up to her then, puzzled and astounded, and said, "Excuse me, but do you know where you are?" She just grinned and said, "Oh, hello, Father. Will you have one with me? What is your name, and where are you from?" "Sister Vanilla, what's yours?" "You'd better come with me. I'm staying right here, and neither rocks nor mountains will move me." And with that she ordered another drink, and the men around were beginning to come back to earth, winking and talking and laughing, and some of them sneering, and a few walking out in disgust, but the greater number of them enjoying the spectacle of a nun in a pub drinking. And I was desperate in my anxiety, and told her she must come with me, and I seized her arm in a gentle grip, but she hauled it away petulantly, and I seized it again, and it was indeed a strong and muscular arm for a nun to have, and I knew straight away that if I were to poke this nun in the snoot, I might get 6 months all right for assault, but it wouldn't be 6 months for striking a defenseless woman. While I was doing all this, the nun had pulled out a packet of cigarettes, and she lit one and puffed it enjoyably. And that was the last straw. The gorge came up in me, and I was filled with a righteous wrath, and I swung that nun around by the shoulder and gave her an uppercut that sent her sprawling. And the men shouted and fleered me, but the nun got up very smartly and started to trade punches, and there must have been a fine team of pugs at the convent. I'm thinking if this one was any example. She had fists like a butcher, but They didn't meet me with any chopping block. I put one on her nose, and a couple on her chin, and two on her eyebrows, and split them. And the blood dripped all over her spotless wimple, and she was a staggering, sorry mess with her coif-bushed skew. But I didn't let up. I threshed her till she fell among the butts and matches, groaning, and then I pulled her up and dragged her outside right into the arms of two hefty policemen, who bundled her into the Black Maria, and me too, but not until after their eyes had popped from their heads, and they had remarked something about what was the world coming to, and the station the both of us were charged. And I was bound over to keep the peace, but the nun got 6 months in the jug for impersonating a woman. The dirty sod, snorted Peter Costello, ferociously amused. What was his game? Acting on behalf of the Orangemen, no doubt, a dirty propagandist. No, said Father Duffy, nothing sectarian. Peter just one of those exhibitionists. The police knew him. He'd had convictions before in other states over a period of years. But that was the first time he was a nun, and the last, I hope. And what did the church think of it all? Asked Miss Costello, a little unsurely. Oh, the bishop gave me a talking to, said Father Duffy, but he winked at the end of it. Good work, Father, nodded Costello. Well, you were talking about Dooley, and I've told you the incident just show that Dooley wasn't the first time I lost me block in righteous wrath. He looked reflectively at the dingy wall in front of him. It's a good thing to have righteous wrath. Perhaps Christ himself did with the moneylenders and others, but it's not a good thing to lose your block, I feel. A shame you didn't hang one on his detestable bus, beefed Costello pugnaciously. Dooley, I mean, there's not a spark of good in the rat bag. We are not at liberty to say that, Peter, replied Father Duffy, smiling. What was he like, Father, when you took the girl back? Miss Costello moved the tobacco tin ashtray across to the priest, nice as pie. And I'll bet I know why, said Costello. You know what he's done with the girl during the last week, do you? What? Been making her serve in the shop. Now you can't tell me that's not getting some of his own back. Behind the counter, mind you, where everybody can see the poor little wretch. Father Duffy's eyes glittered, and his lips firmed into a pencil-like slit. Well, I can see Mr. Dooley and me having another little talk then. I'll make arrangements for the girl to go somewhere, to the sisters or that. I'll have to get his permission, but I don't think I'll have any trouble there. Daniel Costello crept back from the door of his room and sat on his bed. Send her away to the sisters. God, that's wonderful. Much longer in that shop with the stares going on and the sly digs and the questions, and she couldn't take it. She'd break down and squeal. She was all right now, but she'd been there only a week. Wait till the weeks went into months. Different then. She'd talk just to get rid of her thoughts, just for relief. If she goes away, all that will go with her. Better maybe if I put in an appearance, let her see me. But God, she knows why I haven't been. She won't think anything silly, or will she? Hell, I wish she'd walk under a tram or something. The suffering she's given me, the nights of it, can't sleep sick in the morning. Eat me breakfast, want to spew. Don't know where I am at the shop, and that silly old goat Alexander with his endless cab. Oh Jesus, make Father Duffy get her away somewhere, and make everything all right, and give her enough sense not to write letters or anything to me. He heard the voices raised, and he heard Johnny's, and he knew Johnny would be coming into the room in a minute. He jumped off the bed and started whistling, and diminishing the whistle, he walked out into the dining room and greeted Father Duffy, and Father Duffy cordially asked him how he was. Making a novena at Dano, he smiled. Dano looked surprised, then he grinned with a certain sheepishness. "Suppose you're getting tired of the sight of me face," he joked, a trifle uncomfortably. "It's a good face," the priest said, "as a face, and it couldn't be a better place than the communion rails every morning." Peter Costello's face had changed its expression. "Bringing up religion. Hell, get off that subject, don't start that." He hopped into speech quickly. "I had Johnny sing some of the old Irish songs, you know, Father, and he's the one for them, all right. Wrap the green flag, you know that one. Come on, Johnny, sing it." "Yeah, go on, Johnny," said his mother. He cleared his throat, Johnny, and stood nervously against the wall and sang. "Oh, wrap the green flag around me, boys. To die were far more sweet, with Erin's noble emblem, boys, to be my winding sheet." "Ah," murmured Father Duffy, a sadness on his face. "I've not heard that in many a day." And as Johnny went on singing in his high, clear, sweet voice, the priest's eyes glimmered, and he was far away when the song ended. Peter Costello said nothing, but looked melancholy, and his wife knew the mood on him, that she had seen 1,000 times and more, and she saw the priest notice it. And the priest said, "Did it get you in, too, Peter, the song?" Costello looked up with his history in his face, and there was a touch of bitterness in his voice that was common to him in the drink, but was there now without the drink. Did anything good ever come out of places like this? If there's good in places like this, and there is, that good must come out. What chance has a man got, though, to rise above himself to get ahead? No one's tried harder than I have, and don't you try now, Peter. "Ah, in a way, but not like I used to. The spirit's dead in me." "Rubbish," said the priest succinctly. "The spirit's dead in nobody till he's put in a hole and can't make use of it." "Look, I don't want to live in slums," Costello said bitterly, "but I do. I don't want to work me paws to the bone for a pittance at the end of the week, just enough to keep me strength up for the boss, but I do." "I know," said Father Duffy understandingly. "It's hard when you're trying all the same, and seem to be getting nowhere. But tell me, when is a man a failure? Not when he loses his job, or doesn't get that house, or is put in jail, or makes a hash of this and that. I'll tell you when a man's a failure. When he gives in, when he loses courage, then he can sink to the depths of an animal. But when he's got it, he can come to a greatness he never dreamed of." Father Duffy leaned forward and emphasized each word with a drum of his thick fingers on the table. "You've a good wife, man, and 2 fine boys, and a head and hands on you, and there's a lot in this world without those things to help them get on, and they've got on." Costello reached out for his tobacco tin and rolled himself a smoke, and a smile crept over his face, and as suddenly as it had come the mood left him, and he became enthusiastic, saying, "Sure, we'll get on. There's a fighter in front of you, and this feller, he's no slouch either, and look at Mum, that we're always leaning on." And he stood up and flung his arm around his wife's shoulders and gave her a lively squeeze. "There's a kick in the old horse yet, and little apples will grow again. We'll be right, you see. That's the talk," beamed Father Duffy. "No more of this defeatism now. I'll make you a cup of tea," Miss Costello said happily, "and he will come to me when all this is over, and we will be together." The door opened, and her mother came in. "The priest here, Cassie. You all ready?" "Yes." "You'll be all right, darling. Don't worry, and I'll come and see you." The girl threw her arms around her mother's frail shoulders and kissed her soft cheek. "Goodbye, Mummy. Please come soon." She picked up her suitcase and went down the stairs, and her mother followed in the lounge. Father Duffy smiled at her, and Cassie went with him through the shop, and stole a glance at her father. But he was bent and looking for something under the counter, and she passed out and got into the car, and the car streaked away to hurry her in anonymity among the sisters. All the way she did not speak, and the priest respected her desire for silence, and she thought of him, of her lover, and of the growing distance between them, and the months of absence ahead. And she remembered the things she loved about him, and she felt proud of the sacrifice she was making, and proud of him for the sacrifice he was making. And back there in that street that night, Daniel Costello knew she was gone, and he was glad. All this bullish about the poor little thing, as if she didn't know what she was doing, didn't have her eyes open, didn't want it. Gone, and you had months now to think about what you'd do. Watch your step, don't get too fancy, let her know you're thinking of her, send flowers maybe. Do it through the post, and have them put her name on the card, on the flowers, and keep quiet yourself. Nobody know, but she'd wake up all right, and they'll help to kid her along. Hello there, Charlie. How are your love? What's new in the junk shop today? Got any diamonds? The woman laughed coarsely. She was dressed to kill, tight pink frock, faded and elderly fox stole, pearls around her neck, and bangles on her chubby arms, green shoes, and brown beanie with a green feather through it. Her big mouth was overpainted at the edges, and a gold tooth flashed from her denture. Her cheeks were rattled, and her hair was like hay, same color just as dry. Dano saw she had plenty of bosom. What are you looking for? Anything in particular, Miss Brady? Old Alexander pushed his hat back on his bald head and lifted his glasses onto his corrugated forehead. He wore a grubby blue shirt and shapeless tweed trousers. Little bushes of hair sprouted from his nostrils, and like tufts of rabbit fur from his ears. He walked bent at about the same angle as a boomerang. I'm after a good stout billy can, said the woman, chucking him under the chin. Trot out what you got, and let's have a squiz duck. Old Alexander climbed over an oil drum and weaved his way down a brittle path between walls of junk. He fished out a circle of wire with 3 billies strung on it. What happened to Davy? Miss Brady asked, taking a peppermint from her large handbag and throwing it into her mouth. He was a nice kid, nice all right, Alexander told her in a guilty, gritty voice. Got away with a $5, the little swipe, that's all. She looked slightly taken aback, then she screwed up her face and gestured. And you sacked him for that? You can bet the poor little cow wanted it for something, or he wouldn't have took it. He had personality, that kid. Bet you lost some customer sense. Pack of silly nitwit girls, that's all. They were never done cluttering up the place. He'd have gone if he never pinched that $5. Oh well, that's life. She turned with a great, easy smile on Dano. And how is this pet? My, what lovely black hair. She burst into a raucous laugh. Want to look out, or you'll have the same trouble with him. She raised her eyebrows meaningly. He got that certain something, too. Dano felt flattered, excited by the look she gave him, but repelled by her age and her form which, with her corset off, would have sprawled all over the place. He thought, silly old hen, be your age. He's a good boy, old Alexander said, stumbling over a heap of tools in a box. Well, There you are, Miss Bratty. They're nearly brand new. What size? The woman took the billy can she wanted and asked him the damage. He told her, and she hooted and said, "The rotten sharks in these parts," and laughed and tossed another peppermint into her mouth and gave him a 10-shilling note. "Keep a drink out of it, and don't say I don't look after you." Alexander counted the change into her red hand, wrapped up the billy, and she said, and she walked towards the door, "See you later, Charlie." And she looked at Dano and winked and said, "Watch your step, sonny," and laughed her way out. Dano, pretending puzzled innocence, turned to Alexander. "What did she mean, watch your step?" "Hell, son," Alexander said, disappointing him. "If you was to worry about what that broken down chromo means every time she opens her mug, you'd get a job at the taxation department. Got a heart like an angel, but she's no good. Where's she get the miss from? Where's her husband? Which one?" Dano looked quickly at him. Alexander sat down in his antique swivel chair and with finger and thumb rubbed his watery eyes while his glasses sat this time on his nose tip. "She has had 6 of them," he said. "6, Struth. What happened to them all?" "I don't know, but ask her, and she says she ate 'em." Dano thought of the woman's bosom, her heavy curves, and he was excited. His imagination took over and went up to a room with her, only she was young and pretty then, and in the room he watched her, and she turned burning eyes on him, and, "Are you listening to me?" "What? Oh, sorry, Mr. Alexander. I was just thinking, what Mum said to bring home for tea when I'm coming." "What did you say?" "That woman. I said I can remember that woman 10, 12 years ago, and there wasn't a woman in the city could touch her looks. She was one of the finest looking women I've ever seen." Old Alexander warmed up to his ear-bash, and Dano stood there and took it, half listening back in the room with the girl, listening back in the room. Gab, 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 wax boring old goat. On his way home that evening he thought of the woman, Miss Bratty, and he lopped her down and touched her up to suit his taste, and he thought of Cassie Dooley, and felt nervously sick, and he thought of them at home, with their questions. His mother, "Aren't you well, Dano? What's the matter with you these days?" Sick of the job, his father, and Johnny. "Boy, you had some dreams last night, singing out and tossing and moaning. I thought somebody was murdering you," and he felt anxious, and blamed that Cassie Dooley for bringing all this on him, for the 2 months of torture he had suffered since she had gone to the sisters. Torture in some ways even worse than it was before. Soon she'd have that kid, and soon she'd be back with it, and soon he'd have to know what he was going to do then. Turning into his own street, he met a youth named Tucker Haynes, a long streak on a bike at the curb, pimples and picking them, and a long neck like a marrow. Tucker greeted him. "Hi, Dano. Didn't see Wall West coming, did yer?" Dano shook his head. "Owes me 2 bob the cow," Tucker said. "I'm waiting to catch him." "Should have brought your tin opener," Dano said. "That mug's tighter than Long Bay jail." "I'll get it," Tucker swore, "or put him on the knuckle good and proper." He pulled out a packet of cigarettes and offered Dano one, but Dano declined, though he would have liked to smoke. "Hey, Tucker," blonde eyebrows shut up. "How old Dooley's form selling out?" "What?" Dano sprang at the information. "New bloke in the shop today, getting to know the ropes. Old Dooley going through." "Cripes, I don't blame him. Do you?" Tucker laughed. "People poking muck at him all the time, customers dropping off." "When's he going?" Dano asked, hiding his eagerness under a matter-of-fact tone. "Next week, they reckon." "Where?" "Search me." Tucker brought his lips to a peak like a crater, and the cigarette burned from the hole in the middle. Heard he was going bush, but I don't know. He suddenly craned his neck. "Yah, here's west now." Dano grinned. "Right, I'll leave you to it. So long." He walked on, old Dooley moving out, eh? Boy, was that grouse. And when she came out, she'd be going to them. They'd have to take her. The cops would see to that if old Dooley kicked up a stink. The great thing was that she wouldn't be coming back to the street, and maybe in another suburb he could meet her on the quiet, and keep on putting her off until he had her where he wanted her, and she could do nothing. Let that come, find out where Dooley was going, and wait. Great news. He whistled, and he pushed open the gate, cocky and gay, and ready to do anything for anybody.